So I wanted to talk about this book that I've been reading, bro, recently. It's called Pimp, right? It's this book that Dave Chapelle put me on game on while I was watching one of his comedy shows, right? And he says that's one of the coolest capitalistic concepts that has ever been written, whatever. So I caught the book, and it's about this pimp named Iceberg Slim, right? And his journey, right, to become the greatest pimp that has ever been. Much like a Pokemon master, he tries to acquire the most hoes, right? than any other pimp before him, right? In order to become the best.
So
Right?
instead of badges, what does he have? Burner cell phones? Bitch, where you at?
$100 bills in the place of badges. So it's a fucking interesting fucking read, and I recommend it to all of you out there who are trying to get into reading, but think there's nothing that catch your interest. There's not a possibility that this book does not inspire you.
Don't lie. You're trying to scout for the new generation of pimps.
No, nigga. What? Okay, you
will
caught
be
me.
down in the description for the book.
No, but the book definitely is a shocking read. You're not gonna go into it. It's not a cliche. It's not boring. It's not a slow build up. That shit takes off, and it takes off quick, motherfucker. So, right, what I mainly want to talk about was this: when he grows old enough to start pimping, right, and he has been put on game by some pimps that have been in the game for a while, some older pimps. He's like 17, 18 years old, and he tries to get at his first chick to turn her into one of his girls. These pimps actually say some interesting concepts while they're teaching him. Basically, that the way to make a girl yours, a woman yours, is to make her dependent upon you psychologically, right? You start there first. Once you psychologically submit her, then you will have her physically, right? So what's interesting here is he meets her, yada, yada, yada. At first, she's defiant, right? But he romances her by acting contrary to what she expected. She expected him to act like a simp because she was beautiful, right? Expected her to kind of kowtow towards her wills and her wants. And he pivoted in a different direction with his behavior by acting willful. That made her attracted to him. Typical.
He kept the leverage. Yeah.
Exactly, right. So a lot of this is a leverage game. Eventually, he dominates her by, one, acting contrary to her belief. Two, making her dependent on him emotionally once he does woo her. And then three, right, he begins taking her physical objects away, like her money, right? And then gives her an allowance, making him the primary breadwinner, him the valuable one in the relationship. He disparages her and shit like that about the relationship. She feels worse about herself, but every time she feels worse, every time she slaps him, every time he kicks her ass, she comes back with this daddy shit. She likes it. She comes back for more, right? Ish. So that got me thinking about Stockholm Syndrome, right? I don't know if you guys ever heard of Stockholm.
Yeah. So
Stockholm syndrome?
Yeah, it's basically where the kidnapped or the person being.
I always forget my sarcasm goes over your head.
I thought
I thought you were being sarcastic too.
Well, whatever. For the audience who might not know, it's
I
Stockholm
was like,
syndrome
was
is
that bad
basically.
acting or sarcasm?
I didn't get your sarcasm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there might be some people out there who don't know.
sure there
Stockholm
are.
syndrome is basically
like-
when somebody gets held captive, and then the person keeping them captive, right, against their fucking will, is treating them in a way somewhat good, and so at the end of the whole thing, they actually defend their captives, or the captors rather, and even though they were really not trying to help them out, and it can get from medium levels to really like severe levels.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Because you're dependent on this individual, you start to form an attachment. You're associating they're taking care of me, therefore they care for me, and you forget that
and
they
you would go
captured you.
long ways to protecting them and defending them. So yeah, I'm sorry. Go
It's
ahead.
brainwashing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah.
So that shit got me thinking. I'm like, so Stockholm Syndrome traditionally, right, as a psychological concept, is supposed to be a rare instance. You don't really run into this a lot with kidnapped victims or etc. But really, I feel like there are a lot of examples of Stockholm Syndrome that transpire in society and are not recognized for what they are. Here's some of the more interesting Stockholm Syndrome cases I've read about, right? So there's this one female, Patty Hearst, right? So this chick, this story attracted me because the details are wild. So she's in her hotel room, right, or her apartment with her husband, right, her fiance. They're about to get married. Some terrorists at the time, right, break into their apartment and kidnap her after beating the living shit out of her fiance. They're taking her because she's worth money and her fiance has bread. They're gonna ransom her to her family, right? So they take her throw in her trunk, take her captive, drive away after beating his ass. Tell me how they're looking for her. They're like, oh, where's Patty? We gotta save her. We gotta fucking pay. She ends up joining the terrorists after a while, right? And she starts robbing banks, even with the terrorists, right? Because the terrorists apparently, I guess he began to identify with their ideology, right? Whatever it was that they decided to fight for. Eventually, the terrorist leader who she was very attracted to was killed during a shootout, which she was also a part of. This movie shit. It's gangster as fuck, right? I can't imagine being the fiance. Imagine looking for, oh, they took my wife. I'm so worried. Is she on the news? Is she with that the one that whooped my ass?
It's intense.
Bruh. Betrayal. You feel hurt as the husband, right? You risked your life to save her from this. And now she's one of them?
Did you imagine getting to the end of Taken and the daughter was like, no, I'm gonna stay with him. He my new daddy.
Yo.
It's like when you're at the dinner table
Shoot her.
with your girl's dad, and she said, "Pass me the salt, daddy," and you both
You
reach.
both reach. Your life ends.
Bro. Dog, I thought that was so fucked up. Anyway, they end up killing like the fucking leader of the terrorist group, and she ends up saying like, "Oh, like they don't deserve to go to prison," and she actually visits them in jail for a long time after they're in prison and shit.
That shit sticks with you.
Advocates for them to get freed.
You can break someone enough. I mean, shit. Look at perfect example. Game of Thrones. Reek, you can break someone enough to such a fucking point that they're just a dog to you. They're
Reek
just
is the perfect example of Stockholm syndrome. As a matter of fact, you're absolutely right. Reek,
fucking a.
that is just
yeah,
the
Reek.
poster child
Actually,
for
yeah. Why didn't I think of Reek?
Ramsey had like a weird talent for that. Like he knew exactly how to break an individual.
Because he was a pimp.
And he was a sadistic fucker.
He's a pimp.
He was a
He's a
pimp.
pimp.
That's my whole point. Like, this is supposed to be a very rare instance of a psychological breakdown where someone tries to cope with abuse by painting their captor in a wonderful light, right? In a more positive light.
And that's also due to the fact that that captor has this ability to really fuck with you mentally and to really make you devalue yourself
Exactly.
and inflate this
And
persona
inflate,
that you see.
yeah,
of them, just-
deify your captor.
deify them. Yeah, you look
Exactly.
at them like they're that.
That shit is fucking fascinating because as you read through the book and how they describe leverage in order to create this instance of weakness in the person, they're creating weakness where there once was not psychologically in this person's profile. So, right, these people have mastered the greatest pimps, and there's some that have like 20, 30, 40 women doing their bidding in this book. They've mastered the art of breaking someone down and then molding them to serve them, right? Creating Stockholm syndrome. They're fabricating it systematically. I feel like it's strange that there's not more psychologists that have been like put on game on this, like in our research and some shit like this. Because that doesn't seem like something that should be possible to do consistent the way they do.
Okay, now I'm a little confused by what we were asking because you're saying why aren't we on this? But the only way, the only way Stockholm syndrome happens is because people are captured, and we're trying to stop that.
No.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like confused.
I'm not saying why aren't we doing it. I'm like, why aren't we like more? Why aren't we doing more research, right, upon the psychological impacts? Because I think Stockholm syndrome occurs in pimping, occurs in domestic abuse
Because mental health
issues.
is a greatly overlooked factor in our
right.
country.
We should be doing more research into shit like this. I think, right? Because I think not only
No,
is
I
it
agree with you, but
fascinating,
again, mental
be
health
helpful.
is something that is not taken seriously in this country. Like, for example, if you have a therapist, and if you ever, let's say you're seeing a therapist, trying to work through shit, if you disclose that you're having like thoughts of harming yourself or suicide, by law they have to fucking Baker Act you.
really.
Yes. The person you should be able to go to and tell this shit to, they can actually report and have you fucking committed to stop from hurting yourself. Even though ironically, that's place is gonna
It's
probably
gonna make your exacerbate the issue.
yeah, mental health in this country is shit. Same thing with that. Like if you're like, yeah, we saved you, but just good luck with this syndrome.
Another good example, right? So like the house nigga during slavery, right? He was somebody that his profile, the Uncle Tom, right, would begin to favor the master over his own people, because he was given a better place to sleep. He was allowed to stay inside the house, special treatment, etc. Right? This is a form of Stockholm syndrome. He
Absolutely.
He
Yeah.
begins to love his own chains, right? Love his master, love the chains, and to the point where he's willing to sell his own people out in his his
But
master's
could that
favor.
also just be a decision that you make to sell out your people? Sure, because this is the only chance that you have at not having it as worse as you possibly can. You know,
No,
so
I
maybe
would-
like a selfish.
But that
act,
goes
not so
into
much
the-
Stockholm syndrome, because Stockholm syndrome is you truly care for that person. So I'm sure that maybe a lot of them did care for their masters and maybe like really protected them, but I'm sure that also a lot of them were
Some
just
faked
like,
it, I'm sure.
some just like, listen, I gotta get it easy somehow. This is the only way. Fuck it.
Real Stockholm syndrome is
sure,
to the
yeah.
to the end. Bro.
Exactly.
For example, this chick here, Natasha, right? She was kidnapped on her way to school. Poor girl was fucking 10, right? So she's held in the cellar of this dude, in this dude's cellar, a dude named Wolfgang, right? Holds her in there for quite a while, right? Unfortunately, sexually molest her, all that crazy shit, makes her his pretend wife and shit. At first, she's held in the cellar for a long time, but eventually he gives her free reign to walk around
Little
the
by
house, little by little, right? Starts having breakfast with her, things like that, yada yada yada, having her do chores, and he's like her pretend wife. After quite a while, I think she's down there for like 3-4 years before she's finally given the opportunity. He allows her to like clean the rug of his BMW, and he goes off to do something else. And she's finally given the opportunity to like run to the neighbors, make herself like known, and they call the police. And once Wolfgang, the man who kidnapped her, realized what had happened and that he was likely gonna go to prison for kidnapping, he throws himself in front of a fucking train, right? So
Well, that'll do it.
that'll do it, right? She was very distraught about his death, right? Asked to be left by his coffin, right, when he died. And not only that, keeps his picture in her wallet to this day. His picture in her wallet.
See, what makes that
That's crazy.
very interesting is because it's a very weird version of Stockholm syndrome. It's like it's almost like
Like she had to force herself to
yeah,
escape.
it's like she's saying emotionally, I do love you. That's the Stockholm part, but logically, I know this is wrong because if she sought help when he was gone, that means that it wasn't
Part of her knew that
Yeah,
this was
yeah.
wreong.
exactly. So she's at war with herself. That's interesting.
There's a contradiction there. I think
There's like an internal battle inside her
there's a
head.
brainwashing.
It's logic and emotion because, like, think about it.
Interesting.
Like some people I think are self-aware and intelligent enough. They can recognize. Oh, let's say I see Stockholm syndrome happening. That doesn't mean you can stop it from happening. That's a feeling. It's an association. You can't stop that.
This chick that I wrote down here, her name was Mary. She was fucking hitchhiking, which was a bad idea, right? And a fucking couple, I guess she jumped in their car because the couple had a daughter in the car, right? And the daughter was relatively young, so I guess she felt like, oh, it's a man and a wife, and their kid, and they can't be dangerous. Wrong, right? They were, so they kidnapped her ass, right? And they sexually molest her, all that crazy shit. She's like 17, 18 at the time. They kept her for like 4 years. Threatened her, shit like that, subjugated her. There was one point where the hooker, who was the man, right, after like abusing her and shit, gave her like a gun, right, with no bullets in it, and told her to put it in her mouth and pull the trigger, and she did, right, but there was no bullets in it, and that was supposed to be like an act of loyalty. So poor girl was fucked up. So after all these years, and this is what I'm saying, he then felt good enough about her subjugation to him, to take her back to her family, right, after 4 years, leave her there. And she didn't snitch. She didn't say anything. She just sat there, ate dinner with her family, enjoyed her time, left her there overnight. And then came back, picked her up, and went right back to the life she was living with these 3 crazy bastards until finally the wife of the captor felt bad and let that girl free.
That's fucking crazy.
So it's a real thing.
That's
People will
absolutely crazy.
protect their captors, stay silent when they have the opportunity to be free. When literally freedom is there right in front of them, they'll refuse.
Yeah, because your brain's an association machine. You're associating this person taking care of you with, oh, that must mean you care. It's a good thing.
So that computer, that's our brain, is just going all over the fucking place. Doesn't know how to break down.
We're
that info.
just built to make associations.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
all we really are.
I think
We're not as aware as we think we are. Then
I think
We're as in
what this
control.
teaches us is that happiness is relative, right? And the human brain will, if there's no light in your life, it will latch on to anything that it can interpret as positive to create that light, even if it's not
To
real.
cope.
To cope. So even if you're in a terrible situation and you've been kidnapped, etc., if your captor shows you just a little bit of kindness, which isn't real, your brain will latch onto it to create a positive relationship so you don't go crazy.
Yeah, going like with the slavery thing you were mentioning, it's he was treating us all like shit, but you're gonna treat me like crap. Ooh, promotion.
Yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I'm
yeah.
saying? So you start thinking, oh, this is good now, when he's just treating you slightly less shittier.
I was reading a book, right? And one of the characters said something dope. He tells a story about two men that were blind sitting on top of a mountain looking at the sunset. And one blind man asked the other, "Can happiness be taken from a man?" One says yes, the other says no. The one that says that blindness can't be taken from a man argues, just because we're blind doesn't mean that happiness can be taken. I can still taste beauty, the beauty of a steak well made. I can still hear a symphony and hear the beauty of a symphony, etc. I can still feel the caress of a beautiful woman and know her to be great, etc. So on and so forth. And then the other man that says no says, what if you're burned, you can't feel? What if your tongue is cut out, you can't taste? What if you're deaf, you can't hear? So on and so forth. He says, well then, it's pain, right? So how do you feel? How do you know happiness? Does the pain oscillate? Is it different some days? Is the pain more significant other days and less significant others? And happiness is when you're feeling less pain.
That's a very low threshold.
Yeah, I was about to say.
But
man,
then I get it. I get because there's
That's how you
really
interpret
low.
it.
Sure.
Right? I
You
guess that's
know.
what it is for these captives. They feel less
Sure.
pain in these extreme situations, and then their brain is so often in the situation they begin to interpret less pain as happiness,
Interesting.
which I thought was
fucking
dope.
crazy.
I wanted to talk about that on the show. I really want people to delve into these more interesting psychological concepts, and see how they feel about it. I'd love for some of y'all to get in the comments and say what you think about this whole situation, why these people do what they do. It is really interesting. I hope to bring more shit like this to the show every now and again.
I agree. It's fun.
And on that note, guys, that's going to be a wrap. I can't wait for our next episode. I'm promised to read more shit, hopefully about pimping.